Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Jamie.
And this is Erin. Welcome back. Welcome back to you. Welcome back to you. It's been a while.
I know. I was going to say, welcome back to me.
Yay.
I'm so glad to be able to be back here and to talk about who I think is a pitch perfect figure for our podcast. When it comes to Infamous, especially for our generation, I think she's the one who rises to the top. There's very few, I think, who encapsulate quite that media storm. And we'll talk about that combination between kind of class and gender and that whole 1990s media firestorm.
She never had a chance, did she?
No. It does make me think back to your Carolyn Bessette Kennedy episode because of the media environment for women back then.
Yes, I think she's probably the closest one. I'm really excited because I obviously know the Nancy Kerrigan incident, and I know that she grew up poor, and I know that she could do a triple axel, but that's kind of all. I don't know too much more about her.
Okay. Well, I will definitely cover a little more than that. I am trying to keep this to a one-parter, though. But before we get started, I did want to remind everyone to follow us on Instagram. Erin, as always, has been doing a spectacular job on her reels and reminders for our future episodes. And also to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. That will always alert you to new episodes, especially as we post. We're picking up the pace now between Matt and I, as kind of double goes. I feel like episodes are coming out and not always on a specific day. So whether you're following us on Instagram or where you listen to podcasts, that will alert you when a new episode is out.
You usually get some previews of who we'll be covering next. Well, there will be a preview of who we're covering next time. So if you scroll through the feed, you'll see who we're going to cover.
You always get hints.
Yeah.
Yep. You always get hints or direct references to who we're going to cover. And of course, you can join us on Patreon for more content each month. I know right now Erin has a short, for example, on Cleopatra and Mark Antony's children. So that's a good example. If you want more content, you can check us out there. Anything else you want to say, Erin, before I get started?
No, I'm glad to be back with the original co-host.
Oh, gee.
This is actually the second podcast I've recorded today. So me and Matt just recorded one. I'm on a roll.
You are. You're ready to go. I'm going to kind of mention at the top some of the articles and resources I used. I'll also post them on the bottom of our description. And I mentioned them throughout the episode, but the main articles I used was from 2018. There was a New York Times article called Tonya Harding Would Like Your Apology Now. There was also a New York Times article from 1994, February 1994. So when some of the main action happens, also from the New York Times, called Always Tonya, As Cool as Ice, But Trouble. I also quote from an Inside edition from 2018, as well as a Vulture article fact-checking of the film I, Tonya, which I'll reference, because that has, I think, really, especially for the next generation, post-millennials like us, for those who are not familiar with her, have put her back into the spotlight more.
I haven't seen the movie. I've seen clips of the movie, but you did watch it for this.
I did literally just watch it because I was like, okay, now that I've done my research, I really do want to watch it because I had seen clips before. Then the last parts, I did take some from an interview with Tonya Harding by the University of Oregon School of Law on a whole topic of domestic abuse. And then finally, an ABC News interview in 2017. So you'll notice a pattern. A lot of them came out 2017, 2018 when the film I, Tonya came out.
Yeah, I know.
There was kind of this new revived interest in her.
And a reassessment from the 90s. And this is the first person we've covered who's still alive. So Tonya, shout out to you, Tonya. If you're listening to this, please don't sue us.
I know. Yeah, not only is she still alive, she's only 54.
Oh, really? God, I for some reason I thought she was older, but I guess she would have been young in 94.
Exactly. She was 24. The action is happening at very, very young age. So I'm going to start off with the idea of figure skating, because that's one Aaron and I are familiar with, particularly in the 90s, as we were figure skaters back in the day.
Yes. I know the difference between an axle and a Lutz and a loop.
And all the different spins and things like that, and the combinations and all of that. So not only did we ice skate from, I don't know, were we like five or six when we started?
Yeah, I think it's
5 or
probably
6.
right around.
Till about 8th grade. But we also watched a lot of figure skating.
Oh, yeah. A little bit after this, ours was more like the Tara Lipinski, Michelle Kwan era.
Yep, I wanted to note that. So we were kind of in that next era.
For me, I guess living in that world, you inherit the Tonya as villain.
Listen,
I know enough now to look at it a little bit differently, but I think growing up in that era, it was like, ooh, she's
Tonya Harding.
She's the black sheep of the ice skating world.
Oh, 100%. I do remember it was kind of the sunset of Nancy Kerrigan, but definitely that name was still one that I knew at the time. So figure skating, I want to start off, if you're not familiar with the world that it envelops, it's a sport that's really synonymous with grace, beauty, elegance, and athleticism.
Which is why we did it. I say that as I tripped and almost hit my head in my bathroom yesterday. Beauty and grace.
We'll post maybe a picture of us from middle school. We certainly did not inhabit those things, but for those who are on the top of the sport, that was very much what it was about. And I almost put athleticism last because the athleticism came later.
And it was more of the men, because that's what I know. We'll talk about Tonya doing the triple axel. No other woman had done it. So for women, it was more about beautiful little ice princess kind of thing.
Exactly. It was very much like Barbie doll. I would say it was about aesthetics over athletics for a very long time. There was a shift in the 90s and even a little bit beforehand, but compared to many, many other sports, you have a huge emphasis on not only looks, but how you hold yourself, how you skate. On that point, I also want to say, besides controversies over subjective scoring that we know, which happened with ice skating as well.
Those damn Russian judges.
That's one of those jokes that people know. Figure skating has largely seemed to avoid big egos and controversial figures, like O.J. Simpson, the NFL blacklisting of Colin Kaepernick, steroid usage in baseball, cheating scandals, and how many different sports.
I think that's why Tonya was so big, because before that, there's not really anything.
Exactly. It seemed like a very quote-unquote clean sport. Mm-hmm. So it definitely shook the world in a really strange way. So I'm going to kind of start it there. I will say, though, however, there is one name that challenges that perspective, and Aaron and I have already named her in the figure that we're talking about today, and that's Tonya Harding. She's a figure whose name is often associated with controversy, and she's almost become a joke at this point. Mm-hmm. But her story is far more complex than the media narrative surrounding her. And I want to say, while I was doing research, even Obama during the 2007 primaries, he used her name as a verb about kneecapping his competition. Like,
oh no,
Obama, no. I know. Her name has become a verb.
But yeah, no, it is. She's been a joke. I mean, I'm sure she was spoofed on SNL. And not only a bad reputation, but just kind of a joke. There's something about the 90s.
It's like the O.J. Simpson stuff, right? Like the Dodge Durango.
I think that is a good parallel, which is hilarious compared to their quote-unquote crimes.
With her name being a verb for a lot of her life, probably for longer than her name was not a verb in a negative connotation. And even before the event that really, in the film I, Tonya, there's this breaking of the fourth wall in it. In the act, they spend a lot of time talking about the event, which involves Nancy Kerrigan. But even if we exclude that, she was still a controversial figure in the world of figure skating. So I think she could certainly belong on this podcast, even if that hadn't happened. But that is what put her on a whole new level of infamy, I would say.
Yeah, and brought her to a worldwide attention versus just in the figure skating world, which was, like you said, kind of insular.
Definitely not one that is a household name,
Mm-hmm.
where people would be able to recognize and understand. And even now, even if you were not part of the figure skating community or might not even know she was a figure skater, they even bring this up in I, Tonya, the film. Like, some people think Tonya Harding herself was the one who perpetuated the attack.
I think it's really easy if you don't know the story, that I'm sure younger people who are approaching the story now probably think that, unless you dive a little bit further.
Yeah. Before I get started, this story does have a lot of abuse mentioned, both from her parental figures, particularly her mom, and later her partners. I want to say that up front. I'll try to note it when it comes up, but sadly it is going to come up a lot. That is part of her story. So I definitely wanted to put a trigger warning in there about the abuse that she is going to suffer as both a child and as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So just throwing that out there.
If you don't want to hear it, might not be the episode for you. There's plenty other in our backlog.
Definitely. I want to start her story actually with a quote that I think captures her spirit. This is actually from the February 1994 article from the New York Times, and it begins, quote, "She was always different. When other little girls were tentative and shy, Tonya Harding was all guts and gusto, a fearless figure skater who couldn't succeed fast enough. When she learned about such things as championships, gold medals in the Olympics, all she ever wanted was everything."
I love her already. We could stop the story.
And I think that really, as I said, encapsulates Tonya Harding in a one-punch piece. So if you aren't familiar with her, the quickest summary I can give is that Tonya Harding was a hugely talented figure skater who rose to fame in the 90s, becoming the first American woman to land a triple axel in competition.
Which, again, I think I already mentioned it. Men had been doing for a while. Even now, it's rare for women to do it. So doing it in the 90s. If you don't know figure skating, you're like, whatever, I hear about axles. You're going basically 3.5 circles in the air.
3.5. Going forward. So particularly in her routine, you're going kind of blindly forward. You're turning forward and then spinning 3.5 rotations and landing.
Other ones, like a Lutz and a flip, you use your toe pick too. So you put that toe pick in to launch up. An axle is forward instead of backwards. It's just sheer force to get your body up high enough.
Right.
It's insane.
Even now that we're talking about men doing sometimes quadruple axles, like a triple axle for female skaters, like you said, even today is something that's rare, especially in competition.
Yeah.
And so to summarize, though, her career and the thing that's going to make her famous is going to take a dramatic turn when she's embroiled in a scandal involving a 1994 attack on rival skater Nancy Kerrigan, which I'm going to go way more into detail. But this incident and its aftermath painted Harding in a very negative light for many. But if we take a closer look at her life, we can see both positive and negative aspects. There are so many things about Tonya Harding's life that is completely different than those of her competitors in figure skating. Not as an excuse, but especially, I think, with the film I, Tonya coming out, and we've seen in just this era, this reckoning of how the 90s media has treated certain women.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I'm going to mention at the end Monica Lewinsky, which is funny because I put that in my script before I read the second New York Times article, which also mentions Monica Lewinsky to Tonya Harding, and you'll see her reaction to that.
Well, it's Monica Lewinsky. Do you think Princess Diana? We've talked to Carolyn Bessette. If you look at those, I mean, the tabloid culture, which is still bad, is still horrible. Look at what they do to Meghan Markle and the like, but if you weren't alive in the 90s, oh boy, go back and look at some of the coverage, especially being a woman in that era. It was sexist nonsense. I'm sure Tonya, like Monica Lewinsky, she called fat, called pig, and all these things.
Right.
Like, why would a president want to sleep with her? I can only imagine what they said about Tonya.
Pretty much a lot of the same things. And as I said, while there's a lot, I'm going to try to squeeze this into one episode. And so I'm going to start, obviously, as chronologically as I can. There will be some jumping around because, for example, I'll talk about generally some of the abuse suffered at the hands of her husbands. So I'll fast forward some things, but mostly I'll try to stay chronological. And we're going to get started at the very beginning. So Tonya Harding was born on November 12th, 1970 in Portland, Oregon, to Lavonia Golden and Albert Harding. And I just want to note here, not that it should involve judging her mom, but this is actually her mom's 5th husband.
Jesus. Holy Elizabeth Taylor. How old was her mom? How old was her mom at that point?
That I don't know.
Young enough to have a kid.
She was 30. So not old at all.
I know, but to have 5 husbands. Okay, I'm not judging, but to Elizabeth Taylor, Tanya's mom would be like, hold my beer.
And she's portrayed beautifully. I'm not saying that the character of Lavonia Golden is beautiful, but Allison Janney is a firestorm. She won the Oscar for playing her mom.
Oh, did she win the Oscar? I didn't know that.
She did, yeah.
I've seen clips, and obviously Allison Janney is amazing.
She's just power smoking cigarettes the whole time.
Very accurate portrayal, you're saying.
From the interviews that I've seen with her mother, which are much later, there was one at the time. It seems like it tracks, although she will argue otherwise. You will see in the movie, if you watch, smoking nonstop, very, I don't want to say crude, but she's not a warm, loving, motherly figure. We'll just say that right now. We'll talk way more about that.
Not maternal.
No. Tanya's childhood was marked by significant hardship and challenges. So, as I said, her father was her mother's 5th husband. He worked at a rubber factory, and they moved around a ton. They moved around to about 8 different places around Oregon by the time Tonya was a teen. And they were in poverty. Tonya talks about picking up cans on the side of the road to get money. So poverty was a huge part of their story. And her mother, Lavonia, again, trigger warning, as we talk about abuse, was reportedly, and I say reportedly because she denies it. However, we have many accounts beyond just Tanya's that corroborate this, that she was an often abusive figure in Tanya's life, pushing Tanya's intensely in her pursuit of figure skating from a really young age. I'm talking age 3.
Oh, wow. It's not like 3-year-olds have effortless balance.
No, not at all. Despite the harsh environment at home, Tonya did display a natural talent for the sport. And it's shown in the film, which is an accurate piece where Lavonia tries to get her to be taken by one of these top coaches who will actually become her coach. And she's like, I don't coach 3-year-olds. And Lavonia basically just kicks Tonya on the ice and tells her to go skate. And she's, within 6 months, beating competitors twice her age. Very, very natural talent.
Very precocious. That's insane. I can't imagine knowing 3-year-olds. Bravo. Pure natural talent.
Right. So if you've seen I, Tonya, and even if you haven't, there's a scene where young Tonya has an accident. She ends up peeing on the ice because her mom won't let her off the ice. So is this a true anecdote? According to the Vulture article that was fact-checking the movie, it said, quote, according to a woman who took lessons at the same rink as Harding during this time, Lavonia Golden did shout at her daughter, I paid for you to practice, so you're going to stay on the ice and practice.
Oh, no.
In a Chicago Tribune article from 1994, this policy did mean that Harding was sometimes forced to urinate on the ice, according to people who knew her then.
That's horrifying. Not okay. I know 90s were different. A little bit of different time, but still not okay. Poor baby.
Right. This is where I'm going to start getting into Lavonia's treatment of Tonya, so just as a heads up. Tanya's childhood was tumultuous at best. for a better word. And this childhood deeply affected her, obviously, lifelong and in her early career. Lavanya was known to be highly demanding, controlling, and even abusive towards Tonya. She pushed her daughter relentlessly to succeed in figure skating, often using harsh methods, whether it was emotional or physical abuse. She really saw, and actually Allison Janney mentions this in an interview, that she saw Tanya's success as a way out for her and Tonya out of this kind of loop of poverty.
That's why I was going to ask modern day comparisons across the board in terms of any sort of athletics. The reason that they devote so much time and energy and money is for greater things. So she's seeing dollar signs in her eyes because she sees what talent Tonya has.
Yes. And so she was probably Tanya's worst critic, besides Tonya herself. Frequent criticism, which I'll give examples for, verbal abuse, and as I said, sometimes it led to physical punishment. She's been described as a woman who did not show warmth or affection toward her daughter. Instead, she really focused on driving Tanya's success at any cost. In the documentary Tonya Harding, The Price of Gold, and in various interviews, Tonya herself has spoken about how her mother would yell at her, belittle her, and even throw things at her when Tonya didn't meet her expectations. Friends noted seeing the abuse, even things like being pushed downstairs.
Jeez.
In one interview Tonya Harding did with the University of Oregon School of Law on the topic of domestic abuse, she said the following, quote, "My mother would fill up a thermos with real brandy, not flavored brandy, and drink that until she took me to the rink.
No.
The verbal abuse was constant. You're fat, you're ugly, you're never going to amount to anything. It started at a young age, and those words have stayed with me my entire life."
Oh my God. That's horrifying. Well, one, she does not deserve to be played by the amazing Allison Janney. I know Allison Janney does a good job, but she doesn't deserve the amazingness of Allison Janney. Two, I mean, I know this is going for a little bit forward, but are they still on speaking terms, her and her mom?
So as of the interview I had seen in 2018, they hadn't spoken since 2002.
Okay, so they're probably
they were estranged.
Yeah.
So
okay,
probably still estranged.
Okay.
Tonya Harding, for the most part, after, which we'll talk about her stint in popular culture in the 2000s, she's really taken a backseat and really does want to live a quiet life. So the last I had seen, they were still estranged. She's never met Tanya's son.
Okay.
From Inside Edition from 2017, Tonya echoed all those sentiments about the abuse, mentioning the beatings and being hit with a hairbrush in particular, which is seen in the film. If you haven't seen I, Tonya, they show her being hit by her mother with a hairbrush. And from that same special, her mother denies all the physical abuse, saying, quote, she gave her one swat at a competition because she was, and Tanya's mom at this point, Lavonia, mimics moving around, like kind of saying she was not letting her comb her hair. And I was just trying to do her hair, that end quote. In Truth and Lies from ABC News, Tonya said there wasn't more than a day that went by where she wasn't beat. She also notes an account that's shown in the film as a true account, although, again, her mother denies it, where her mother threw a steak knife at her from 10 feet away. And it hits her in the arm.
Oh, my God. That's not like just a little bit. It's not like one day.
Just pushing her to be better.
Yeah, that's horrible. And kind of speechless. You have to feel for young Tonya growing up in that kind of environment. Is she an only child? Does she have siblings?
She's an only child between Livonia and Albert. She does have a stepbrother who actually, trigger warning, sexually assaults her when she's 15.
Oh, man.
That's one of her mother's children from a prior marriage. But she's the only child between the two of them.
I knew that she grew up in poverty. I knew she had some abuse in terms of her relationships with men. But, I mean, this is hell. No child should have to go through this. I'm not excusing what happens later, but for a child, this is hell. I can't think of anything worse.
No. I've seen a few interviews where her mother is interviewed, and even while she denies it, it's sounds like, again, very much trying to excuse past behavior.
Sure, she's not going to come out and say, yeah, I did it all.
Mm-hmm. She puts a lot of the blame on Tonya, which is classic abuser.
So we don't like her mom, even if she's played by Allison Janney.
No. There was a documentary that came out about her kind of before she hit, I would say, the big time. She was about 15. It was before she won her first big skating championship. The filmmaker was doing it for her senior dissertation at Yale. She made this documentary about Tonya at the time, which I'm going to talk about a story here shortly, but I do want to note that the filmmaker, who was a senior in college, she wanted to call CPS, but she was told that that would ruin Tanya's skating career.
Oh, no. The thing that could get her out is also the thing that prevents her from getting help.
Right. Because Tanya's skating career was shaped by her mother's ambition. Like, she's the driving force, for better or worse. Lavonia's the one who managed her early career. She took her to competitions across the country. She did not allow Tonya to have a typical childhood, which isolated her from friends. And she really insisted that her focus remain solely on figure skating.
Mm-hmm. So she didn't have friends. I'm sure she had people in the figure skating
community, yeah.
But not the normal childhood that most people would recognize.
Right. In the 2017 interview with Inside Edition, Lavonia mentions how she had 3 jobs to pay for Tanya's training, and she sewed all her costumes by hand.
Mm-hmm. I did remember that, the homemade costumes.
The sewing, yeah. In that interview, claims that Tonya was the one who wasn't always the easy one to be around.
She's a child. Doesn't matter if she's easy to be around.
Of course, she's a teenage girl.
Oh, God.
She's not going to probably be easy to be
Yeah,
around.
you were hell on wheels when you were preteen/teenager. You tried to literally open the door of a moving car on the highway. So,
yeah.
I'm sure Tanya's mom would have loved to deal with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Tonya has no support systems, no emotional supports.
Was her dad gone by then?
I'm going to talk about her dad in a little bit. He's mostly absent. She actually has a positive relationship with her dad, but when her parents get divorced, she's still pretty young, and he has to move out of state to work.
With Livonia's track record, I assumed that it wasn't marital bliss.
No, but she did have a closer relationship with her dad, and her dad's the one who gives her the very rough and tumble Tonya that we'll see later. I do want to say, though, that Lavonia's treatment of Tonya did not go unnoticed. As Tonya gained recognition in the world of ice skating, Lavonia became a polarizing figure. While she continued to push Tonya to succeed, her behavior only seemed to exasperate Tanya's sense of isolation and conflict. In interviews later in life, Tonya again spoke about how her mother's demands made her feel really unloved and unsupported, even though she knew her mom was doing everything in theory to help her succeed in skating.
Yeah.
Like, at least on the financial and the energy side.
Your heart breaks for her because, one, she knows she needs her mom, and her mom's doing that. But that's also the only mom that she knows. It's kind of normalized when that's all you know.
Yeah. You already mentioned about siblings. As I said, she didn't have any full siblings. And in Tonya, they do show very briefly in one scene a half-brother who she calls Creepy Chris in the movie. She did have a half-brother named Chris Davidson. And in the Oregon School of Law interview about domestic abuse, she does mention being abused by her stepbrother and being sexually assaulted by him in their home when she was 15 and he was 26. So, did happen.
Your heart breaks for her growing up. I don't care how unruly or whatever you want to say as she gets older. But at this point, your family's made up of your mom. Your mom is abusive. There's no warmth there. Your only other sibling abuses you as well. You're like, the fact that she's still alive is stunning.
It is.
That she continued to live, and also that she'll continue to perform even at a high level.
Despite all that. So at the age of 12, she began to compete in regional and national championships. And by 1986, when she's about 15, she is 15, she made headlines and she became the U.S. figure skating champion at the young age of 15. And she became the first American woman to land a triple axel in competition.
Was that at 15?
I'm going to talk more about that later.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to talk more about the triple axel. And then by 16, she's winning championships and she leaves school. So she doesn't finish high school, but she does later earn a high school equivalency from a local community college, but she dropped out of school.
Okay.
Here's from that documentary, the Sharp Edge, that was filmed, as I said, for the Yale students' senior project. In it, and you see it in this interview from the Inside Edition. They show this tape. They actually talk with Margot Robbie, who's watching this. In the tape, Harding is shown on the night she placed 6th in her first national senior competition. So she appears all proud and happy until she's on the phone with her mom. We don't hear her mom on that side, but I'll tell you what Tonya says. But her mother expressed the feeling her daughter should have finished higher. And in the video, which was shown on 60 Minutes, Rawlinson, who is Harding's coach for the majority of her career, says about the conversation that Harding said, this is how things went. So she goes, quote, "So I heard you missed your competition. You know, you didn't get any credit for that at all." And I said, and this is from Tonya saying, "Mom," she goes, "you did terrible. You know that?" She said, "You sucked." And I said, "Mom, I got half credit for it." And she goes, "So the rest of the program sucked too." Margot Robbie in an interview said that this clip in the documentary has one of her favorite lines, which is after Tonya hangs up the phone. So she hangs up the phone after that and says, "What a bitch."
Honestly, you go, Tonya. I feel like you go out there and skate, mother. How about you try? Especially it's her first senior, so you're jumping up a level. You're with people older than you, adults in some cases. I'm with Margot, Team Margot.
Mm-hmm. I'll talk a little bit now about her relationship with her dad. So her relationship with her father was quite different, even though he was not the primary figure.
He's not around all the time.
No, but they definitely have a much more, not just nurturing relationship, but they share more commonalities. From the February 1994 article from the New York Times, Always Tonya is Cool as Ice but Troubled, it notes that some of her untraditional pastimes, it notes in the article. So, quote, "Thanks to her father, Harding also grew adept at other pursuits. He taught her how to break down a car engine, hunt deer, fish, shoot guns, and shoot pool. As other skaters and officials celebrated at a party the night she won the national title in 1991, Harding joined friends in a hotel bar for a few games of 8-ball. A severe asthmatic, she was smoking," end quote.
I know that she's supposed to be like sort of boyish compared to a Nancy Kerrigan, that she's got more quote unquote boyish hobbies.
Right. And that's just frequently shown in the film. So if you've seen the film I, Tonya, you will have seen this, or drinking, taking shots, smoking. This wasn't anything that she hid. This is who she was.
Take her or leave it.
She was called white trash. She was called a lot of names for it, but this is who she was. And as you said, very much differed from Kerrigan, who grew up with loving parents and wore Vera Wing dresses.
Very like patrician, ice queen in the best possible way. Nancy Kerrigan's everything that people imagine a figure skater to be. Tanya's not that.
Yeah, Tonya has, short cut hair, kind of sloppy makeup.
I always see the puffy permed blonde hair.
Yeah, right. Does her own makeup. All her dresses are hand sewn. There's a quote in the film that Tonya says is not true, but she tells us another account, which is, I wouldn't say just as bad, but just again, rough around the edges type of person. She definitely stood up for herself, not a quiet person who would just be in the background. She was loud.
She's not submissive.
Not at all. And that's, as she goes into her relationship, she's also not submissive. And unfortunately, her partners do not like that quality in her. So that cycle of domestic abuse will continue into her romantic relationships, most famously with Jeff Gillooly, who she meets at 15 at the skating rink.
How old is he? I'm scared.
I don't think he's that much older.
Okay, so they're similar age. I was prepared for him to be fully an adult.
He was 3 years older, so he was 18, she was 15.
I don't fully love it. I don't fully love it, but at least he's not a full-grown man, I guess. He's on the cusp of being a full-grown man.
So she's born in 1970. She gets married to him in 1990. So she gets married to him when she's really young.
20.
By the time she's a teenager, now I'm going back to her skating skills. She had shown remarkable skills, particularly in the field of jumping. As we talked about with athleticism, that was qualities that set her apart in a sport that was often dominated by, as I said, grace and elegance, almost more like dance, especially in its origins. It started more as a dance versus the jumping piece.
Yeah, if you look even further back.
1950s.
Yeah, like if you watch their routines versus nowadays, it's hard to believe it's the same sport.
Yeah, I mean, Tonya Harding said she would not want to compete against today's figure skaters even, like, you know.
They're very much in the Tonya mold. I'm sure we'll talk about her legacy.
Yes,
but
very much in that athleticism piece that's like, whew. So she trained in various rinks around Portland, Oregon, and she eventually moved to a more intensive training program under her coach, Diane Rawlinson. She was both in the film. She's going to be her coach most of her life, except for a small little break. And Harding's early skating career, as we said, faced numerous obstacles, including those financial difficulties.
Yeah, skating's not an inexpensive sport. You've got the skates and then like
sharpening them,
the blades,
paying for lessons.
Yeah, and ice time is just hugely expensive. So I can't even imagine. It's not an egalitarian sport by any means.
Not at all. Same with hockey. If we're talking about other ice sports. You know, compared to sports like basketball, where you can pick up a basketball, not saying that it's easy, but you don't need a lot of equipment. This, you need outfits. You need a trainer. You need a coach, you know, to learn these skills. You need ice time. And yeah, most ice skaters devote their entire lives. When they're little, again, they're skating for 6, 7, 8 hours a day.
Heck, even when we were in high school, there were some days where we go to the rink before school, which I think about now. I'm like, God, to get up that early and then ice skate and then go to school afterwards. I could never now.
And she couldn't afford the best training or equipment. That was always going to be an obstacle for Tonya. But luckily, her raw talent was able to overcome that. So the fact that she was able to do all this despite these barriers is
amazing.
Even more impressive.
Astounding.
Yeah, completely. 100%. So her achievements, as I said, in the world of figure skating were significant. As we said, particularly her technical skills. So her skating style was very distinctive, and it really set her apart from many of her competitors in the world of figure skating because she focused on difficulty and technically demanding jumps over, as I said, the grace, the kind of music, the artistry. I'm going to have a quote here later. They use the word, she's like storms on ice. She's not
the most graceful.
Right. And it has nothing to do with weight, but she's not this little super petite who looks just like a child, essentially.
A little fairy princess on ice. There's a reason. Well, one, it's hard on your body, but so many of these pros, they're retired by early 20s, mid-20s is ancient for an ice skater. It's similar to, I think more people are more familiar with gymnastics maybe, but yeah, It's very similar.
Yeah, Tonya, when you think of her body type, she's like a gymnast. She's muscles, which was not well liked in the figure skating community. When we're talking about judging, there's so much subjectiveness to judging. And so part of that judging was about the artistry. It's a sport that's judged not just on technicalities. It's gone more technical in the post-cheating scandal. I'm not going to talk about today.
I'm trying to think back, and I know things have changed, but wasn't it? They're like,
it's like technical
and artistic,
which is odd for a sport.
Nobody cares how you score a touchdown in football. It's a touchdown.
Right. You only get 4 points because the artistic merit was not up there.
Believe me, I've said this in many, many Michigan football games. Just score. Doesn't matter how you do it. Just do it. You don't get extra points if you do it in a way that's not easy. Same amount of points, but not so in figure skating.
I feel like Harding would agree with you. It's like, if I do this jump, I should get the same amount of points. How are these other skaters doing better than me when I'm doing harder jumps, but they are way outscoring her in artistic merit?
And it is all subjective. You could take 10 people, they could watch it, and they'd probably all have different scores. I'm with Tonya on that. It's not consistent across the board.
Right. And she had raw power that you really can't teach. In the article from the New York Times from just a few years ago when Tonya came out, they said even when she went on the ice now in her 50s, compared to the skaters who are on the ice, just you can see that raw power that she has. And it allowed her to perform more difficult maneuvers that her fellow figure skaters could not do. So her form of figure skating, though, unfortunately, really appeared out of place in a world full of Nancy Kerrigans and Christy Yamaguchis, who were celebrated for their presentation, as I said, the artistic quality, the choreography. I'm not saying that they're not skilled in any way, but their programs are more on being fluid and that aesthetic beauty. And as I said, almost being more like a dance.
I hate to pull the sexism card, but I do think that Tanya's style would not be as out of place in the male sphere,
100%.
The men's side. As women, you have to be as graceful and just this beautiful little ice princess. If you don't look like a fairy on ice, then you're not getting the points.
And so those skaters, it wasn't a priority to push the limits of the sport's technical demands. It's not like others were like, yes, I need to do a triple axel. I don't want to say they were motivated, but technical difficulty wasn't the main motivator. I like how this article from the New York Times talks about how, on the other side, Tonya, quote, stormed through routines, determined to succeed in her own rough-hewn manner and homemade costumes. While others skated to classical music, she had routines to rap. And, I want to say as a little side note, I was very excited to see the Jurassic Park theme.
Oh, yeah, I have seen that. I have seen clips of that. Go, Tonya.
That was very odd while others are doing classical music, Mozart, things like that.
She's doing do.
Right.
As massive Jurassic Park fans, I think we should recuse ourselves now. I don't think we could make a proper judgment.
Yeah. As I said, that Tonya did have a brief break from her main coach, Diane Rawlinson, and she had worked with Dodie Teachman, who was actually a student of Diane. So this quote comes from her from the same article of the New York Times.
Do we know why she took a break? Was there any bad blood?
A little bit. In the film, she's shown as throwing an ice skate at her and getting mad. Tonya, that's addressed in the Vulture article. She says it wasn't as dramatic as that, but they just had differing views.
Maybe they needed a little bit of a break from each other.
They did, yeah. Basically, Rawlinson wanted her to rein it in a little bit, it seems, and Tonya was not willing to do that. And she was like, Dodie Teachman wants to coach me, so I'm going to go with her. So she coached her from 88 to the 1992 Olympics. So what she said about Tonya was, quote, Tanya's big deal was that she didn't want to play the game with the hair, the dress, the look. Quote, I would never tell her she had to do anything. I'd tell her it was like a job. Treat it like a job. You need to look a certain way when you skate, but you don't have to be the same person off the ice you are when you're on the ice. Tonya was just never a fan of that.
She's not that person. She's not going to play the game.
You'll see her in some more frilly outfits, but she still does not blend in with her fellow figure skaters. And I really like this. This is actually from the later New York Times article from 2018. Tonya said, I hated the word feminine, she said. It reminded me of a tampon or a panty liner.
Okay. I'm with you. She's just not going to be that person.
Nope. And She tries sometimes. You'll see her in some competitions where she's in the frilly outfits and things, but she's still, when it's being judged, when it's in front of the media, she's Tonya, for better or worse.
I can understand her being like, well, it doesn't really matter because no matter how much I do that, I'm not getting the scores. I'm not getting much out of it. So why even bother pretending at that point?
Pretty much. So we already mentioned, but I want to highlight here again that one of her most notable achievements in figure skating, the sport, was becoming the first American woman to land a triple axel in competition. And that was a move, as we said, that requires so much precision when it comes to height, rotation, control. And this became a signature element of her style because it was a rare move to do, and it was an incredibly difficult skill that few women could even execute, let alone in competition at the time. The fact that she could do that gave her an edge over other skaters in the technical merits by far.
We've already talked about the immense amount of skill that it requires to do that. And like, it's hard enough to do it in everyday practice, but to do it in a competition where there's an audience and you're under so much pressure, it astounds me. I can't even imagine doing that. But it also didn't really, I mean, it mattered, but it didn't really matter. It didn't do much to help her in terms of her scores.
She would get really frustrated about because her skating was seen as more aggressive and driven by power rather than the lightness. Like, she was not light on the ice. She was raw power. And then again, bring in her homemade outfits, the fact that she's not focusing on these graceful movements and she's just more high energy.
It's bullshit. Honestly, it is bullshit.
Yeah, it is.
I could not even imagine how pissed I would be to work so much on a triple axel, be the first U.S. woman to do it, and then it mean nothing.
You should watch I, Tonya.
The amount of rage that I would feel.
Yeah. But her movements were seen as, quote unquote, rough and less refined compared to the very controlled performances of her rivals. And this did lead to some talk already that her achievements were not given the full recognition they deserved due to biases in the judging system, which is not going to be the first or the last judging scandal. And this won't be the time where scoring will change, but it will change to make sure that those technical merits are given the weight that they deserve.
She was skating in the wrong time.
She was, 100%. Because it was all up to the judge to decide how they wanted to give her. It was out of, 6 points that she could get high scores in technical merit, but her artistic scores would be low. And so she would often fall behind the Nancy Kerrigans or the Christy Yamaguchis. One last time, this just really highlighted the difference between Tonya and her rivals. This divide in figure skating with Harding representing, like we said, this new approach that's going to actually become what we're going to see today. Not just with the new scoring system, but more of that raw power. If you're not familiar with figure skating, as Aaron said, thinking about somebody in gymnastics like Gabby Douglas, right?
Yeah. And Simone Biles.
Yeah. Those are the two I was thinking of. You need that power in order to do those things.
But you have to do it in a graceful, ladylike manner. You can't have too much power.
Right. Her competitors still adhered to the more classical way of skating. So this was just a kind of transitional time. And unfortunately, Harding's background and her persona were often used against her by critics and judges. Coming from a working class family with a rough upbringing, she was viewed as an outsider in a sport that was often associated with wealth and high society. It was definitely at odds, her appearance, with the polished, glamorous images that were often associated with elite figure skaters, with Kerrigan wearing Vera Wang and Tonya wearing homemade outfits. You see this really highlighted in the film I, Tonya. And this led to her being unfairly criticized for not fitting the traditional mold of a proper figure skater, both in terms of her style and persona. So in the New York Times article from 2018, she notes that other investigators had, quote, dietitians, and Tonya was eating broccoli and cheese from Spud City, where she worked at the mall. She had asthma. She had muscles. I was always told I was fat. I was ugly. I wouldn't amount to anything, end quote.
Mm.
In the film, I, Tonya, there's a very famous scene where we see her telling a judge to, quote, suck my dick.
She did say this, or she said something similar.
No, she didn't. She said she's clear that she did not use quite as many F-bombs in the language that was used in I, Tonya, but she's talked to the judges before, and she did speak to the judges, in this case, in the back hallway afterwards, and they told her to have better dresses.
I would murder them. I'm okay if
Yeah.
Tonya wants to murder them. That's fine.
I know, that made me very angry. And she said, well, if you can find me $5,000 to make me a dress, then I won't have to sew these anymore. You know what? Out of my face. Definitely aggressive, but understandably.
I'm with her. Team Tonya on that one. If you want to pay for my dresses, then if not, shut up.
So I haven't talked much about her marriage yet, but I'm going to need to bring it up before I go into the incident. As I said, she married Jeff Gillooly in 1990. She had been seeing him since she was a teenager. Her mother in the film, which it was not mentioned whether or not this was a true quote or not, but based on what I know, probably something similar. Her mom says he married the first guy who didn't call you ugly.
That's not an unusual scenario. If you've not been given love in your childhood, unfortunately, the first person who's relatively nice, you might go towards that. That's a pattern.
Yeah. So their relationship was fraught with violence and control. He was abusive toward Harding, both physically and emotionally. Reports suggest that he would often belittle her, insult her, exert control over her.
Mm-hmm.
And they do divorce before the incident.
Oh, they are divorced, or kind of.
Yeah, it gets tricky. So they technically are divorced, but then they get back together.
They're on and off.
Yeah. They're on and off. And that's a lot of the relationship. But effectively, they were not together officially at the time of the attack. The marriage eventually dissolves for the last time after the attack. In the film, I, Tonya, they cover this abuse. Some people have problems with it because I guess in some screenings, people laughed at it.
Humans suck. I'll just say
Yeah.
that. Humans suck. The abuse should not be played for laughs.
So what it does do is there's parts where it breaks the fourth wall, where we have conflicting reports. There's a part where Tonya bursts into the house with a shotgun, and then she turns the camera to say, I did not burst into the house with a shotgun. Say, the closest comparison I would have is to like Daisy Jones, where you hear that from them when they're older.
Mm-hmm.
And they have conflicting stories on what happened. But Jeff Gillooly doesn't 100% deny the abuse. There's just certain incidents where he's like, no, that didn't happen.
But it didn't happen like that.
Or Tonya will say, but it did.
He said, she said, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some abuse on her side. The cycle of abuse, man, it's hard to get out of. She's reenacting the only thing that she's known.
Known. Yep. There's a scene in the film where he slams her hand in the car door. She said, yes, that happened. He said, no. We get these conflicting things, but we can say that it was not a healthy relationship by any means.
The particulars aren't right, maybe, but the essence, there is truth to it.
Yes. Okay, now we need to discuss probably the thing that most people know Tonya Harding for, which is the Nancy Kerrigan attack. It's probably the most infamous events in U.S. figure skating.
Oh, it was everywhere in the 90s. It was pure tabloid fodder. It had everything the media loves. It was a girl fight gone wrong.
Yes, especially seeing Kerrigan crying, which I'll talk about. And it happened in the lead up to the 94 Winter Olympics. It centers around this shocking attack that happens on Nancy Kerrigan, who was Tonya's leading competitor, and the controversy that followed, which implicated Tonya Harding and her associates. We're still not quite sure how far or what exactly Tonya knew, but let me list the key events. And it is done in a very fumbling way. And it's shown in the film as a fumbling way.
Not the most brilliant crime in the world.
No.
I know that she wasn't directly involved in it, which is so frustrating because it's like her name is synonymous with it. Nobody, unless you really know the Tonya Harding story, nobody knows the name of her husband, her ex-husband who did it. It's like, maybe he needs to be more famous.
Right. Sean Eckhart was her bodyguard, and he gives himself like a lot of credit, saying he has all these associates, basically making him out to be this like big shot guy who knows all these people who can do bad things, and that he's known by the FBI, which is shown in the film and said to be true, that he would brag about all this. The attack happens on January 6, 1994. Nancy Kerrigan, one of the top skaters at this time, she was attacked after a practice session at the U.S. Skating Championships in Detroit, Michigan. A man who's later going to be identified as Shane Stant struck Kerrigan on the knee with a metal baton. So the attack, obviously, to her knee is going to be brutal, and it left Kerrigan in visible pain. Although I want to note that she did not suffer long-term injuries.
Okay.
He fled the scene, which in the film, and this is one of those ones where they ask, did it actually happen? He tries to get out of this locked door, and he can't get out of it. And he's like panicking. He smashes his head to smash the glass door. That actually happened. To flee the scene.
Criminal mastermind right there.
Yeah, yes. And Kerrigan was taken to the hospital.
And so Tanya's not around. She's not in the ring. She's nowhere. Okay.
Nope. Not in Detroit. Initially, Tonya Harding claimed she had no involvement on the attack on Kerrigan. However, in more recent years, for example, in an interview that ran on Good Morning America in 2018, Harding said she did overhear Gillooly and Eckhart, which was her bodyguard, talking about, quote, taking somebody out to ensure Harding made the 1994 U.S. Olympic team. So what we do know is that Harding's ex-husband, Jeff Gillooly, and his accomplices, including again, the guy who actually did it, Shane Stant, had orchestrated the attack, and that the motive appeared to be to hurt Kerrigan, which would reduce her chances of making the U.S. Olympic team, therefore helping Tonya.
Which I don't understand is Tonya, she was probably going to make the team anyway. Like, I just don't even get, or was she on the edge?
A little bit.
Not that it really matters in terms of a justification.
Right. I didn't read why it happened. It's shown in the film, but the Winter Olympics were shortened that time. She competed in 1992. Tonya did, and Kerrigan. And then Tonya was kind of on the outs, just was not taking care of herself. Her relationship, again, was strained with her coach. And Rawlinson, her original coach, is the one who's going to coach her to the 1994. The film, she comes up to her and asks if she's willing to come back because they're going to have Olympics not in 4 years, but 2. And so Tonya starts retraining because she wasn't training, didn't think she was going to compete again. I don't know why it was only 2 years. That's something I should look up, and maybe we'll add as a little, that will be one of our little specials. But I think if this had happened in 92, it would seem more dumb because it'd be like, of course, Tanya's going to make it. But I think at this point, it was a little more iffy.
Yeah, if you hadn't been training, you're a little bit rusty.
Yes. And as I said before, Harding and Gillooly were allegedly aware of the plan, but in the immediate aftermath, denied having any direct involvement. After an investigation, authorities discovered that Harding's bodyguard, Sean Eckhart, had been really involved in the planning of the attack. Gillooly and the other men were arrested, and Harding was implicated as well. As I said, during the investigation, it was revealed that she may have known about it, even though she initially denied it. What she was accused of, for sure, was conspiring to cover it up. And this is not great for Tonya on any level, and certainly not in the court of public opinion.
No. We love to hate a woman, especially if you give us any reason to hate a woman. We're going to do it.
100%. Yep. Yep. Especially, as we said, this is the era of tabloids and 24-hour news cycles starts happening. And so the video of Kerrigan crying, why me, became iconic.
Yep.
And Kerrigan quickly becomes a media sensation, too. It does elevate both of them. Obviously, Kerrigan in a sympathetic way and Tonya as the bad one, right?
Kerrigan's the perfect victim.
Exactly. Of course, this led to intense public scrutiny on Harding. As it unfolded, Harding's reputation was severely damaged. She did have to do some probation and time. She pleaded guilty to hindering the prosecution in connection. This is the big thing. It resulted in a sentence of probation, community service, a fine. She had a $100,000 state fine, 500 hours of community service, 3 years of probation. So what that meant basically is that she knew who attacked Kerrigan, but only afterwards. She basically kept the investigation from moving forward. And the thing that really killed her was that she was banned for life from U.S. Figure Skating Association events, which they do everything.
She's literally worked since she was 3 to do this, rising through the ranks. She's done so much time, energy, everything, and now it's gone.
And she's 24. She's only 24. In the film they show in court, she's like, anything but that. Please, like, I'd rather do prison time.
Yeah.
In the article from the New York Times in 2018, it's about how difficult things were because even if she wanted to coach, she wouldn't be allowed to go to the competitions.
It's not like she's had any other jobs. What else could she literally do?
Yeah, exactly. This is heartbreaking for her. She does compete in the 1994 Olympics, as does Nancy Kerrigan, who had recovered.
A lot of people might have seen there's video of them practicing.
And there's one of the famous photos of Tonya was her boot lace supposedly broke early in the free skate. And so she goes over to the judges and she's crying. She has her boot up. She's got her foot up. She's trying to show the judges that her boot lace had broke early. And she is allowed to restart, but she doesn't do well. She finishes 8th, even though she thinks that this is unfair.
Or could she have ever gotten a fair shake? Because this is after everything. Everybody knows what happened.
Meanwhile, Nancy Kerrigan, despite the incident, she was able to recover and she won the silver medal. She had this really successful post-Olympic career. She had a professional skating career and media appearances. And meanwhile, Harding's reputation and career were permanently tarnished by her involvement. It not only completely blacklisted her from skating, but it also shaped her public image, right, as a villain in this narrative, right? This evil woman dominated by the idea of, right, good versus evil. It's this media darling of Kerrigan versus this rough and tumble, non-sympathetic Tonya.
Yeah, you're like, she never had a chance. We love a comparison. And if Nancy Kerrigan was the perfect ice skater, Tanya's not.
The opposite.
Your heart does break for her here. Again, I'd be like, nobody knows Jeff. Nobody knows his name unless you're really into Tonya.
Yeah.
If you've dug in.
He did change his name to Jeff Stone.
Cool.
Because of Galooly being such a distinctive.
Well,
yeah.
Too bad. Fuck you.
And technically, Tonya Harding, she's in the article, she says at the beginning, she's like, my name's Tonya Price, which it is. I'll talk about her other marriage. But she's also like, people only know me by Tonya Harding. So for good or for bad. Of course, in the whole media firestorm, she's the antagonist next to this very proper, refined, poised Kerrigan. They're just always going to be compared. Even though Tonya says that they were friends prior to this, and they had, in some early competitions, had roomed together.
There was no antagonism before this.
And the scandal, of course, is going to remain the defining moment of her life and her career, right? At 24 years old.
Can't imagine the worst thing that you've ever done to be on that stage. I don't know if we fully know the extent of her involvement.
And I don't think we ever will, right?
Yeah, everybody knows you all did dumb shit when you were 24 years old, and to have that define you for the literal rest of your life.
100%. So from an ABC News interview in December 2017, when asked if she cared about how others perceived her, she said an emphatic quote, "No, yes, I mean, I care, but I don't care. The media had me convicted of doing something wrong before I had done anything wrong at all. I'm always the bad person. You can't push me that far because I've been nothing. I've been nothing several times," end quote. She credits the faith in herself and her son for keeping her going.
Mm-hmm.
She says in that interview that she wants her son to be proud. Said before, besides Galuli, she was married. She's currently married to her third husband. Her second husband, she married a year after the scandal, Michael Smith. He was also abusive. He was reportedly violent toward Harding. Again, same thing of physical and verbal abuse. They only were married for a year. They did not stay married for very long. And her life after figure skating hasn't been an easy one. Following her lifetime ban from figure skating, she faced significant legal and financial troubles. Like I said, she owed so much money and her reputation was severely damaged.
How do you even make money after that? Nobody's going to want Tonya Harding working for them, no matter if it's in figure skating or not.
She had difficult maintaining stable employment because of that. And as we said, her personal life was marked by these relationships, these unhealthy relationships, these abusive marriages, the two that she had, most famously with Jeff Galuli and Michael Smith. So she had personal turmoil and just a lot on her plate. One thing she is known for later, do you remember her stint in boxing? I feel like that's one of the one things that comes to my mind when I think of her post-skating life.
Yeah, that was probably, what, 2000 or late 90s,
Yep.
2000s? Yeah.
Exactly. So, in the late 90s and early 2000s, she tried to reinvent herself by pursuing a career in professional boxing. She fought in a few fights, but it was short-lived and not widely successful. And she said her heart was not into it. Like, it wasn't something she loved. She did fight, most famously, a televised charity boxing match against Paula Jones in 2002. If you don't know who Paula Jones is, she's the infamous former Arkansas state employee who accused then President Bill Clinton of sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Harding loses the match, but it helped keep her in the public eye, although maybe not for the best reasons.
I remember it being like kind of a joke, being like, haha, she's back again. She's doing something
Now
funny.
She's fighting, right? But now she can fight. Wink, wink. She did some reality shows. Again, keeping in mind often that the reason she was invited on was because of her infamous reputation.
Yeah.
And that was kept being brought up. They were bringing up the Kerrigan attack constantly. It was this hard thing because she needed money. And at the same point, it continues to remind the public of this thing that seems to never go away for her. So in 2004, she appeared on Celebrity Boxing, and then she competed actually in Dancing with the Stars in 2017.
Oh, yeah, she was.
I know. I didn't fully remember that till I saw that. And I was like, oh, yeah. So, I mean, not the worst, but like I said, in order to do that, these appearances do allow her to re-enter the public spotlight, but often in the context of her controversial past at the center.
At what price?
It's actually a really good wordplay. Speaking of Price, she met her third and current husband, Joe Price.
Oh, God. I have to set that up for you. I lobbed it up in the air.
It did. I kind of love this, though. So she met him, Joe Price, in 2010 at a Washington restaurant where there was karaoke going on and he was singing Great Balls of Fire.
Oh, my God. I love it. Be cute.
And, yeah. Apparently nowadays, for fun, they hunt. And she hunts with a bow and arrow because supposedly, quote, she wanted to give an animal a 50-50 chance to make it interesting and fair. The article, though, also side notes that felons, which she got a felony, also can't have guns in Washington. But they say in the same New York Times article, she can build anything. She can fix anything. She had a life. It was going fine. Like, she has pretty much endured despite all these things stacked against her.
She's kind of back where she started.
A little bit. And so I'm going to end her story with what I mentioned at the beginning, that things began changing right in the 2010s and more nowadays, where a lot of formerly quote unquote scorned women. I originally had thought like Monica Lewinsky, and funnily enough, in the 2018 New York Times article, they brought that up, and actually Tonya was appalled at the comparison.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she said about Lewinsky, quote, she disrespected the country, and she noted she was nothing like her.
It's internalized misogyny.
Little
It's
bit.
a little hard to escape.
It is. But one point that I do agree with her on is she said she was surviving and she wasn't making mistakes like a privileged person who gets an internship at the White House. Now, while I won't necessarily agree with a mistake, there is definitely a privilege divide.
I understand where she's coming from. Ultimately, it's her story. I'm not going to tell her that she's wrong.
How she should feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the 2010s, her life and legacy did begin to be re-explored in a more nuanced way. The 2014 documentary, The Price of Gold, explored the events surrounding the Kerrigan attack and her life afterward. And that's actually what inspired the filmmaker who did I, Tonya, to create the film. She didn't get much money. I think like $1,000 for her life, for her to sign off on I, Tonya, with it noted that if they made money that she would
get more. Okay.
So the film I, Tonya, which I've mentioned multiple times, it starred Margot Robbie as Harding. It ultimately portrays a fictionalized version of her life, but it does depict her in a much more complex figure caught in this whole web of circumstance, abuse, manipulation, all these things. And it revived interest in Tonya Harding's story. For some, it actually finally portrayed her in a way that was definitely way more sympathetic than she had been ever portrayed. And Harding herself really talks about the catharsis the film brought her.
Okay, so she doesn't feel like she was being used again. This isn't, oh, they're using my story.
She has slightly mixed feelings, but it's more because of, like I told you, where it was brought up in the article that people and one of the screeners were laughing at her abuse.
Yeah.
It's more of like, why would people think that way? Like, her and Margot Robbie were fine, and she views the film in a positive light. She doesn't necessarily like how other people view the film as a way of, some people think of like poking more fun at her, the poverty, her mom, those things that, whereas having seen it, I wouldn't say, again, it's not a dark biopic, but it shows the abuse. I don't think the tone is condescending in any way, and I don't think it makes it lighthearted.
It's not poverty porn or anything like that.
No, there's parts where you are kind of, I don't want to say laughing at her, but she never has been a pretty perfect Barbie doll princess. So she's a little rough, right? A little rough around the edges, but I don't think it's shown in a way to make her the butt of the joke.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
That's my opinion. But I can see how, depending on what mindset you're going in and what you think of her and how you want to view it, how people could view it in that way. Because you want to laugh at a woman being abused.
That might say more about you than about the film.
Right, 100%. She has talked about how much the media has eaten her down. She insists that if she had done a clean program in the Olympics and done well, that things would have been better if she had been allowed to place as she should have. So she still holds, I would say, some grudges by that. While she's still associated with scandal and controversial actions. There's definitely this change in starting to see her as a victim of her circumstances, right? She's an abused woman from a troubled background who was exploited by many others in her life. So she really now has, though, become an advocate for people who have also suffered domestic abuse, as I told you about from the interview from the Oregon School of Law. And she's spoken out about her difficult upbringing and her struggles with this abuse cycle. And so that gives her story, right, much deeper context.
Yeah.
And just prompts that reconsideration of how you view her and the Nancy Kerrigan attack. Again, it might not exonerate her, but you might see her as a more fully complex woman.
Ooh, we don't like complex women. Well, we like complex women, but the world in general has a problem with complex women.
They're like, can't we just judge her by this one thing that happened when she was 24?
24. That would make us feel so much better. Since Tonya came out in 2017, I have seen Tanya's name and the story in a lot of different places across the internet, online. It's perhaps not always the most flattering, view of her, but context matters. And I think that a lot of people are maybe not exonerating her, but interacting with her in a different way and her story in a different way.
So before we do the judgment, I want to end with this quote from Harding herself. So she's asked in the ABC interview, "You are a polarizing figure. Some people love you, some people hate you. It's rare to find someone in the middle." And I want to end with Tonya Harding's quote. She said, quote, "People want to put me down or say bad things to me. Either I don't say anything back or I laugh. I'm like, I've heard all of that before. Maybe you should come up with something new. And then I turn around and I walk away. But every time it still hurts. I'm human. I have a heart. I care what people think. But you can't please everybody. And that is the hardest thing." End quote. Her life definitely embodies, right, triumph, tragedy, resilience, skill, all these things all wrapped in one and kind of rising from, despite her, again, very, very humble beginnings to Olympic and athletic glory, and then obviously the downfall. But at the end, she's a complex person. She's a person. And somehow she's continued to rise above all these hardships and public scorn to live a quiet life. After the film has come out, she's gone back into her quiet life, just wants to be remembered as a good mom. She's not seeking the limelight or that approval anymore. So now it's our judgment time.
Yeah. You go first because we always have whoever presents it to go first. I'm curious about what you're thinking.
I give her what do we say is our baseline, like a normal everyday person? Because everybody has. Is that 85-15?
Probably, I'd say.
It's kind of been our kind of normalized. That most generalized, most people around 85-15 or 80-20. I would put her around closer to the 80-20 mark, maybe edging a little bit like a 78-22 or something like that. I want to first, though, highlight the fact that she overcame abuse in her marriages, abuse by her mother, horrific circumstances.
We'd love her story. I mean, her story would be like the ultimate story, overcoming the odds, if not for the event.
Yes. Of the Nancy Kerrigan attacks. So it's hard for me to scorn a person who's come from nothing, who, despite all of those challenges, was able to become such a top person in her sport, and somebody who should definitely have way more credit given to her with changing figure skating. Like, she did change women's figure skating. And I cannot imagine every day as a 15-year-old and you're already self-conscious and you're already being told by your mom and everybody that you're fat, you're ugly, all these things. And you have to show up on the ice in your homemade ice skating outfit. Everybody else around you is in these beautiful store-bought, big-name designer outfits. And again, you have muscles. They're like, again, little fairy babies. As somebody who felt in my early teens, like muscly when I wanted to be more a little.
That's still nowadays, women don't like to lift weights because they don't want to become too muscly.
Right. They want muscles in the quote unquote right places, right? Which you're like, what are the right places?
Spoiler alert, there's no right places for a woman.
Right. You just can't have cellulite, can't have fat.
Nope.
Have to be muscular, but really just in the abs and maybe your ass and your thighs and stuff.
It's so easy.
And toned arms. But then even people like Michelle Obama, who has the most goddamn toned arms, is still made fun of. So it's like,
can't win.
Being told all of that, not just about her body and her looks, but also even how she skated, like telling her mom, but Mom, I got half credit. And her mom basically being like, that ain't shit.
You could never do anything right.
Yes.
The amount of rage that would build up in you, feeling like whatever I do is not right. There's no unconditional love in my life.
Right. The only that time that she started, I think, to feel some of that was with her romantic relationship with Jeff Gillooly, which obviously ultimately turns abusive. And she's stays for a long time because that's what she's used to. This is what love looks like to her. That's all she's seen. She's not seen a healthy relationship. She doesn't know what a healthy relationship looks like. And when she does leave, it's hard to leave for good. There's that feeling of like, nobody is going to love me because of all these things. And let's say worst case scenario, she knew about the entire Nancy Kerrigan thing. Entire thing. Yep. She planned it from day one. She had all the information handed off to her bodyguard and was like, go do this. I still don't think it's not a murder for one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Kerrigan could have never skated again. She didn't know that, she'd be able to be healed by the Olympics. But I don't think because your associates did something, even if you knew, even if you instigated it, I don't think that eliminates all of who you are as a person. It doesn't eliminate all your accomplishments, like the triple axel. It doesn't eliminate where you came from, and also doesn't eliminate where you went after. At 24, your whole life was figure skating. Just kidding. Now you cannot do any figure skating ever because the U.S. Figure Skating Association is involved with everything. So it's not like, now I'll go skate in these professional skating events or all these things. It's like, nope, you're done.
I feel like the punishment has so far exceeded the crime. She's been punished for decades for a crime that she might not have done. But even the crime itself, if we look at it, it's not murder. Not great. I don't love it, but it seems like, is that worthy of her entire life being destroyed?
Right. Ruined.
I think that this is like the ongoing question of who's worthy of being rehabilitated. We're allowed to rehabilitate Princess Diana. Are we allowed to rehabilitate Monica Lewinsky? Well, some people think yes, some people think no, but these figures like Tonya Harding and like Monica Lewinsky, there's a huge amount of people who anytime they pop up, it's like,
but not her.
No, yeah, like you're not allowed to rehabilitate these ones, but these other ones, it's difficult. I would probably do like 80-20. I think with her circumstances, it was inevitable that she would fall into an abusive relationship, whether or not she knew about this incident or instigated it. I don't think we'll ever know. But like you said, at bare minimum, if this is the worst thing that she's ever done, she's been punished in an insane amount, and she's going to live the rest of her life as Tonya Harding, this,
right,
this crazy ice skater. And I don't think that's fair.
It's been 31 years. If she'd be in prison, you wouldn't be in prison for 31 years for orchestrating this attack. And Nancy Kerrigan has gone on to not only be able to skate professionally and had a life, she can fade into the limelight and pop up when she wants to. You know what I mean? Tonya Harding's name gets brought up way more than Nancy Kerrigan's name does.
Yeah. It's a shame that her achievements, her doing a frickin' triple axel, that's always going to be second to this incident, which she was not the one holding.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. I don't want to say that she's faultless in this. I don't want to say because of her upbringing that she didn't have a choice. Obviously, she had a choice to make, and she might have made the wrong one, but she's truly been punished the rest of her life for this, and we'll never stop punishing her for it.
Right. Even in this era where she has been rehabilitated, at least some, she is still the punchline.
We so rarely allow women to be complex. We've reduced her to this one moment, and it's really difficult to overcome that.
Yeah. And especially when you add on other factors like her femininity, like she is, as she said, she sees the word feminine like tampons and panty liners. She wants to show up as herself.
I 100% think that if she looked like Nancy Kerrigan, there would be a different reaction. Even if the exact same circumstances, if she was on the stand and she looked like this little fairy princess,
right?
People are more apt to forgive them. Oh, she's been taken advantage of by these men, but with who she was, it was like, oh, well, we're not going to have that conversation of her being taken advantage by her husband or anybody because she's Tonya Harding. She can fend for herself. She's the instigator. You see this time and time again.
Yeah. I do think that plays a huge part. Like you said, if she looked like Nancy Kerrigan, if she kind of followed the public rules at the time of, again, femininity and how to act and played by the game.
Yeah, if she was on the stand and crying and she looked like
grateful, I'm super grateful, like, and didn't question things. Why am I getting scored lower when I'm doing all these technical things? It's like the thing of, well, why isn't she smiling more? Or, you know, why does she look so angry?
It's hard to have those conversations. And even if you're not articulating that subconscious bias, people, they're going to see that and they'll be like, well, she looks guilty. Just vibes. Off the vibe, she seems guilty. It seems like something she would do.
Yeah. There's studies that show, right? Good-looking people tend to get lesser sentences.
It's very true.
It's these unconscious biases that, and I don't want to say that she's not attractive. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What in the 90s and early 2000s was defined as attractive, right, in our public society.
The 90s had, if you look at any tabloid about female celebrities and them being overweight and they're like,
oh God, yeah, like asking them their weight on TV.
Yeah, it's so fucked up. If you think it's bad now, the 90s were a hellscape.
I know. I remember seeing, was it something on TikTok? I don't know. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that, all of that. And I wonder why I had eating issues back in the day. It's like, well, of course, I'm surrounded by even like, you know, Britney Spears and all these people.
Jessica Simpson was quote unquote fat.
Oh yeah, 100%. She was the joke, right, of the pop world.
It's insane. So, of course, Tonya never had a chance. I know she could have made some different choices, but
I don't know if she had that opportunity, that even if she said no. Because the thing is, we don't know what extent she had in the plot, and it doesn't matter because she's still treated the same. So I think even if she had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever, because her ex-husband, Jeff Gillooly, was involved in it, she was always going to be involved.
She was screwed either way.
Right. She could be completely 100% never heard of it before or after the event. And people are going to believe what they want. Doesn't matter how many times she says what her thing is. Not that I'm saying, again, that she can't lie. She can't tell her story different because, again, it has shifted.
It's a great story. It's perfect tabloid fodder. It was perfect for that time. It would still play nowadays. You could see why. but it's been warped and used in such a way that you forget that it's a real person at the heart of it.
Right. As we said at the top, and they mentioned this in Tonya, some people think herself
Did it.
batoned Nancy Kerrigan.
I'm sure if you ask 10 people, probably 5 or 6 or 7, especially if they're younger and they weren't around, or even if they're older, everything kind of melds together, what you've heard or think you've heard.
That's that Mandela effect, which I just had to look back up what it was.
Yeah, the Mandela effect.
100%. Well, that's all I've got.
It's nice to have you back on the podcast.
I'll be back. Yep, I'll be back. So all of you, don't forget about me. I know Matt makes a great co-host, but don't forget about me, the OG.
We won't.
I don't want to be the Brian Dunkelson. Dunkel, whatever.
Dunkelman, I think.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Nobody remembers. Everybody remembers Ryan Seacrest. And Matt will not be the Ryan Seacrest. Don't worry.
Okay.
If he was, that means he'd take over everything. Then I'd be taking over, and he'd be also hosting not Price is Right, Wheel of Fortune.
Is he hosting Wheel of Fortune?
Yeah, now he is. Yeah.
Oh my God! And he does like
everything. It's gonna be Matt. You're gonna
no.
He's gonna be taking over every podcast.
Like America's number one podcast, Ambivalent Offenders with Matt.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast.
As always,
rate, like, subscribe, and all the places you get podcasts.
It really helps us when you do rate and review, especially a nice one. We like that. It helps people find us. And yeah, we love to hear from you guys. You can also send us an email at ambivalent.offenders.podcast@gmail.com or leave a comment wherever you listen to podcasts. And we, in some capacity, will be back. It sounds like for sure Aaron and Matt at some point, and I will definitely be back as well as life kind of settles down here for me.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you back in whatever capacity. It was nice. It felt normal to podcast again.
Yeah, felt good. Well, we will talk next time, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.